So welcome back, everybody. We are on our new course, Modern Physics, Philosophy, and Theology, dialoguing interdisciplinarily between modern physics, philosophy, and theology. And this is very, very important. And not only physics, cosmology also, the theoretical pillars of the modern cosmology, contemporary cosmology rests upon two central theoretical pillars, namely theory of relativity and quantum theory. So without adequate introduction to these two theories of physics, we cannot move on to discussions in cosmology. Hence, we have this introductory sessions on relativity theory and quantum theory. I will be inviting a couple of scientists also to speak to you on theory of relativity, quantum theory, chaos theory, and so on. Our course is very much interdisciplinary, science and religion, science, philosophy, and religion. So philosophers and theologians will be elucidating the theological, spiritual, religious dimensions of the developments in modern physics, like relativity theory, quantum theory, chaos theory, Big Bang theory, and so on. And before that, we will have some introduction to relativity theory, quantum theory, chaos theory, and so on. Okay. So in this, we will have this being perhaps the most important course of our curriculum itself, I would say, because physics and cosmology, we are clubbing together, mostly all theological questions with regard the existence of God or the negation of God, theism or atheism from the scientific point of view is very much founded on cosmology. How did the universe originate? Did it originate by itself or did it have no origin at all? Is there a creator for the universe? That forms the central big question in cosmology and theology as well. And that is why I said this is one of the most important courses of our curriculum as well. We will have not less than 10 lectures in this course, Physics and Cosmology. In this opening lecture, I would like to situate our overall course itself in its historical theoretical framework. Our first lecture, in this first lecture, I will just introduce the two major theories, relativity and quantum theory, in its historical setting. Maybe I will just share the slides also with you. Let me see if what I am going to do here now, just the paradigm shift in history of physics from the classical physics or the Newtonian physics to the new physics. There is a huge paradigm shift that has taken place in modern physics. Why this dialogue between physics and theology is possible at all? Mainly because of this major paradigm shift that has taken place in the history of physics. Okay. Physics, say some 100 years ago, had been very much materialistic, significantly atheistic, we could say. However, as a result of the breakthrough developments in physics, marking the beginning of the new physics with relativity and quantum theory, religious belief has gained a lot respectability, we could say. Materialism has been the outcome of the philosophical reflections or has been the natural philosophical outcome of the scientific developments in classical or Newtonian physics, we could say. However, as new physics began to occupy the center stage in the history of physics, things have radically changed. The believer needs matter more than the atheist today. I am inclined to think. These are statements. We need to argue it out. That is what we are going to do throughout this course altogether. Now, situating our arguments in its historical setting, the physics before Einstein was called the classical physics. Or in other terms, is also termed as the Newtonian mechanics or the Newtonian physics. Certainly, we have dealt with something of the Newtonian mechanics in our preceding lectures by Job and Stephen J. Out in the course on philosophy of science. Please recollect those inputs, mechanical philosophy of nature. In that, we have already highlighted the elements of mechanism, reductionism, anthropocentrism, materialism, etc., are as consequences of the mechanical philosophy of nature. In fact, the mechanics was the most important development in the 16th to 19th century. Classical physics or the Newtonian mechanics dates back to the developments in physics from the 16th to the 19th centuries. Prominent figures or the founding fathers of mechanics are Isaac Newton, Kepler, Galileo, Copernicus, Leibniz, Descartes, and many others. All these top renowned scientists were firm believers in God or religion as well. However, the irony of the situation was that atheism was the offshoot, the philosophical offshoot of the mechanical philosophy of nature. Isaac Newton had said that there is nothing more delightful to me than people moving to believe in a deity through my scientific words. We have already discussed this point. Job has discussed these points with you. Kepler himself was a seminarian, and he considered himself as a priest of the book of nature. Similarly, most founders of the mechanics or the mechanical philosophy had been believers. However, materialism and atheism was the outcome, or several philosophers of science and historians of science and philosophers tended to interpret the claims of the developments in mechanics along that line. Okay, this was the state of affairs with history. Religion was considered to be an affair of the uneducated old ladies alone. If you are a scholar in Oxford or Cambridge and found to be a churchgoer, you are considered to be a less enlightened man. Okay, that was the philosophy of the time. What were the strongholds of the mechanical philosophy? Firstly, mechanism itself. What is basically mechanism? Mechanism is related to machine. Universe was looked upon as a huge machine set in motion by God in the beginning. And later on, God has no role in creation. Universe was compared to a giant clock because clock was the most complex machine developed at that time, beginning with the Industrial Revolution and so on. No? Okay, so today they might have said a supercomputer or something. Universe might have been compared to. However, that is why it is called a clockwork universe. Universe was, so somebody wound this giant clock called the universe in the beginning and left it to unwind itself by itself. And later on, God has no role in creation. If at all there is God, he is a kind of deist God. There is no role for providence in creation. That was the claim of mechanical philosophy. Then how do they explain the natural phenomena? matter, motion, space, and time. These are just the four fundamental elements that science is required to explain out everything. Matter, motion, space, and time. All natural phenomena can be simply explained just with the help of these four fundamental categories. This was the claim of the mechanical philosophy. That is why it is called mechanical philosophy of nature. Okay, mechanism. The clockwork universe, and when universe is compared to a machine, there is no role for organism. Organic view of nature was replaced with a mechanical understanding of the universe, beginning with this clockwork model of the universe. As a result, exploitation of the earth was the result of it. Matter was considered to be dead, passive, inert. I am explaining these things in some detail so that a radical contrast is there with the understanding of matter in new physics. And this understanding of matter in new physics, in relativity and quantum theory, they are loaded with the theological overtones. Say, for examples, our understanding of body, resurrection of body as glorification of matter, or the transcendence of the human soul, they gain greater rational respectability and plausibility as a result of the developments in new physics. Okay, but that was not the case with the mechanical philosophy. That is why I said this paradigm shift from the classical physics to the new physics is very, very important from the theological point of view. So, exploitation of the earth, the negative view of matter, the dead and inert and passive understanding of matter, and the consequent result was the onslaught over nature, the industrial onslaught, the technological sabotage of nature, we could say. That is how we are brought to the verge of the ecological catastrophe as we are facing through this very visible changes in climate altogether, we could say. Okay, see, just highlighting one element, this you may consider as an off-the-cuff remark only, not exactly related to our discussion in physics, but since we already mentioned this exploitation of nature, as science religion theorists, this will be very important for us, this concept of eco-footprint. What it says now, eco-footprint is a technological term some of you may be already familiar with, or in the final course on the special questions. And I know Professor Reginald will be dealing in some detail later on in his discussion on environment and science, ecology and science religion dialogue. Eco footprint is the amount of food, water, and other resources that we require to sustain ourselves on this earth. The amount of productive land and water a given population require to produce all the resources that it consumes. That is what is called eco footprint. And what resources can we consume? Certainly, we need energy from fossils and so on. Housing, other resources and materials we need. Industry we need to sustain. Veg and non-veg food we are consuming. For clothing and sheltering, we need natural resources. And see, this is how the scientific estimation goes. 2.3 hectares of biologically productive land and say per person. Okay, and in that we are setting aside 12% as recommended by the Brundtland Commission to protect biodiversity. So for humans to sustain themselves, we have 2 hectares per person upon Earth. Our eco footprint must not exceed 2 hectares per person. But see, this is how the present eco footprint of the world goes. The world of average has already overshot more than double Netherlands, as much, Canada, 11.1, US, 13. See how much we have exceeded the world average. Countries such as the United States, Australia, Canada, Singapore, New Zealand, Hong Kong, and Sweden occupy footprints over 200% greater than the 2 hectares available per global citizen. This is dramatically contrasted to Bangladesh, Ethiopia, Pakistan, Nigeria, with less than 1 hectare per capita. So this is the unjust scenario that we are in with. See, what scientists are telling us today, no? Average American ecological footprint is 24 acres or 12 hectares around. If everyone on Earth lived like the average American, we would need at least 5 more Earths to sustain ourselves. Okay, this is how it goes. Average US citizen, if the entire humans of the world, if the entire citizens of the world live like an average US citizen, we need 5 Earths more. French citizen, 2.7, UK, 3.1. Likewise, it goes. Okay, so what is the point here? And this is the average ecological shoe size. Coming to sub-Saharan countries, they are deprived of the fundamental basic resources that they are naturally entitled to. Okay. Anyway, these kinds of contradictions are there. Anyway, this mechanical philosophy, the mechanical worldview leading to unbridled exploitation of natural resources is partly responsible for the unjust distribution of resources across the world, we need to be saying as science legend theorists, perhaps, I think. Okay. Then the next point is reductionism, another philosophical trait in the mechanical worldview. Mechanism number 1, then reductionism. What is reductionism? You know, reducing everything to something. Physical reductionism. All natural phenomena explained purely in physical terms or in chemical terms. And more philosophically, there is epistemic and ontological reductionism as well. And this point you are familiar with as philosophers. In the history of philosophy, we have seen that. Reducing everything to one substance in the Aristotelian metaphysics. That is an ontological reductionism. Or again, for materialists, this is matter moving in under force in space and time. That is another ontological reductionism. Epistemic reductionism, say for example, the verification theory of the logical positivists. Verifiability becomes the criterion of meaning. That is epistemic reductionism. But what is important for us in the context of mechanical philosophy of nature is physical and chemical reductionism. That is to say, biology has no significant role. Even biological phenomena is explained purely in physical terms. As I said, life is explained as a consequence, as a byproduct of the complex interaction between material particles under the influence of force. Okay, therefore, organisms are nothing but a set of pack of physical and chemical properties alone. Accordingly, teleology has been completely ruled out from nature. Teleology, you know, is purposiveness in nature. Purposiveness of nature has been ruled out from nature altogether by reducing everything to. And there are several elements that has led to these kinds of things. Something kindly recollect all what Stephen Jay had taught you, and also Job had revisited this point. Therefore, I am not going to dwell in detail on this point of protectionism. Another philosophical trait that has been dominant in the classical Newtonian physics is anthropocentrism, third principle. What is that? This is related to ecology that we already discussed. What is that? Anthropocentrism means everything centered around humans. This was the outcome of the mechanical philosophy of nature. Nature is only earth, or nature is simply the footstool of the great king human. Things are meaningful. Things exist only for the instrumental purposes of the humans. Non-human and infrahuman beings have meaning and existence only in as much as they are useful to the humans. This is the extreme form of anthropocentrism. Unfortunately, this was the philosophy, theology that governed the world for over 3 centuries, especially from the 16th to 19th centuries. Fortunately, these things have been replaced today with the emergence of the new physics. So you can see how exploitative attitudes these. I come to conquer thee with the power of mathematics. This was what Francis Bacon said in the 18th century. Nature is there for our maximum consumption and exploitation. That is what we call anthropocentrism. However, friends, all these things have changed today. This is what I wanted. This is where I wish to situate the new physics in our discussion of the philosophical religious implications of the modern physics. Anthropocentrism today is replaced with the universalism. Universalism, what does it say? Human is no longer the pinnacle of creation. Man doesn't occupy the central role in creation. He is just a string in a web of relations. Just a strand in a web of relations. Relationality matters here. The web of life has been emphasized today. The systemic view of life. Where does it come from? From the world view, from the philosophy that is emanating from new physics, from the theory of relativity, quantum theory, chaos theory, the new cosmology, the new biology. These developments have reconceptualized the meaning and existence of humans and human life altogether. We are forced to relativize ourselves in the overall matrix of creation. Okay, humans are just a strand in a cosmic web. We need to be explaining that we will be doing eventually. And mechanism is replaced by symbolism. A machine is not a symbol, we know. There is no, what is a symbol? Symbol in hermeneutics would mean something that makes the real really present to us. Symbol is different from a sign. There are several traffic signs. We don't call them a symbol. A symbol is something that makes the reality really present to us. My body is a symbol making present my real self. Laughter is making present to us the reality of joy. Tears making present to us the reality of sorrow. Joy, sorrow, body, these are symbols, we could say. Likewise, universe is today a symbol, no longer a machine. The time is coming whereby we could say the entire cosmos can be reduced to a single equation like H2O. I'm just citing Paul Davies, the theoretical physicist from Australia, who said today science offers a surer path to God than religion. Religion is offering today a surer path to God than science, Paul Davies said in his book, God and the New Physics. That is a very famous book. You can consult at least some pages of that. Okay, what does he say? The developments in physics is such that the cosmos itself must be considered as a drop of water. I think Davis' statement is influenced by the famous lines of William Blake, the English poet. One can see a whole cosmos in a grain of sand, a whole heaven in a drop of water, an eternity in an hour, and infinity in the palm of your hand. These are mystical lines. A grain of sand is simply the symbolic of the entire cosmos. And this poetic imagination is very much captured in the worldview of the new physics as well. Relativity, quantum theory. That is why these physicists like Davis and many other scientists, recent physicists, they are forced to articulate the interdisciplinary implications of their own findings. Again, we could say reductionism is replaced by holism. Holistic is the metaphor that is extensively coined in modern physics. Frank Wilczek, renowned theoretical physicist, received the coveted Templeton Prize for Progress in Religion, I think 2 or 3 years ago. Exactly, kindly check it on the web. Frank Wilczek. He speaks about harmony of the cosmos and physics and the harmony of the cosmos. In that, he is emphasizing the role of symmetry in create universe. The universe, everything is symmetrically identical with everything. This needs a lot of explanation eventually as we advance with physics. With the help of some inputs by some of renowned physicists themselves, we can explain more of those things. Philosophically, very enriching and enlightening these findings are. I am only just anticipating the gist of the scientific worldviews that we will be just explaining from the point of view of relativity, quantum theory, chaos theory, Big Bang theory, these major developments in modern physics. Anthropocentrism today is replaced with the universalism, which is ecologically very sound. That is why science itself is providing the alternative worldview for the for ecological problems. Science has been largely instrumental for the ecological crisis. Ironically, it is science itself that is providing us with the conceptual and theoretical alternatives and resources for a new ecologically sound holistic worldview, especially the modern physics. Mechanism replaced with the symbolism and reductionism with holism. Okay, I will just wind up this first part and then come back to your questions. Okay, in this point of view, what we are going to say here altogether now, there is altogether a re-sacralization of the world, or in other terms, more in physical terms, secular terms, a re-enchantment of the world. Sorry. Mechanical philosophy had wiped out all organic, transcendental, spiritual elements from the world. Purely materialistic outlook towards the world, a disenchantment of the world. World has been highly enchanted. There was a mystical worldview predominant from the ancient indigenous traditions onwards, whereby the tribal traditions, the Adivasi traditions, the indigenous worldviews had a very positive, proactive, and healthy approach towards nature, where harmony and a relationship has been emphasized. This was an enchanted worldview. However, mechanical philosophy wiped out this enchantment from nature. Fortunately, new physics is re-enchanting the cosmos. In every respect, we could say. And re-sacralization of the world, what is that? The sacredness of the nature is analogically rediscovered by developments in modern physics. Of course, scientists are not going to say about the sacredness of nature. It is unto our interdisciplinary philosophical and theological hermeneutics to argue that the recent developments in physics is loaded with theological overtones, whereby even a particle of dust is very much symbolic of something transcendent, where the various assumptions of the articles of our creed or faith gains greater scientific respectability, as I put it in my introduction. Therefore, the re-sacralization and re-enchantment of the world, that is what we science religion theorists and science, the intersection from science and mysticism will be emphasizing. The complementarity between science and mysticism, complementarity between science and religion today, unlike the conflict between sciences and the religion in the Middle Ages, especially in the context of the mechanical philosophy of nature. Today, we have an emerging complementarity of science, physics and religion, physics and theology. For that, we are very much indebted to the developments in physics, theories of physics, such as the developments in relativity theory, quantum theory, chaos theory, and of course, there are many other theories also that we have got to be focusing on. But time will not allow us to deal with all these things in detail. After all, we have got to cover cosmology also in this course, but the essentials certainly we will be discussing here. Okay, now I will stop my input for a while. Let me see if there is anything in the chat box. Yeah, from Christopher, is it not true cosmos is just like a small blue dot as identified by a Hubble telescope? In fact, Christopher, that question is very good. Thank you for that poetic imagination. In fact, your framing of the question itself is influenced by John Glenn's remark from the Apollo spacecraft. I think, the statement by John Glenn, I think, the astronaut, they did not land on moon, but the Apollo spacecraft that moved around the Earth before landing, and they took the photograph of the Earth. The Earth is simply looking like a blue small marble piece. If you touch, it looks very fragile. Even a single touch might spoil it. We must consider it very sacred. Go for his original citation. That is very, very impressive and interesting. I am only citing from my memory, no? So this is simply like a small blue marble piece, something like that John Glenn has said. Okay, and certainly Hubble telescope, of course, it has what has Hubble telescope contributed to our understanding of the cosmos? Hubble was launched about 35 years ago. Only with the launch of the Hubble Space Telescope, we realized that there are galaxies beyond the Milky Way. Until then, our understanding of cosmos was restricted to the Milky Way galaxy alone. Of course, there were speculations, but Hubble Space confirmed that we are just one among the 2 billion galaxies in the cosmos. No, sorry, 200 billion galaxies in the cosmos. It relativized our role very much in the universe. Our Earth is not even just a grain of sand, literally, compared to the gigantic size of this cosmos. Our cosmos is enormously gigantic. The Earth is around 12,000 kilometers plus kilometers in diameter, no? See, you can place 1,600 Earths adjacent to one another on the surface of the biggest planet in the solar system, that is Jupiter. Then you can imagine the size of Jupiter, how big it is. But adding together the entire mass of the 8 or 9 planets in the solar system, it all constitutes just 2% of the entire mass of the solar system. That means the rest 98% is of the size of the sun. Then you imagine the size of the sun, but our sun is relatively a small star. It's still an average sized star. There are about 50 billion such stars in our Milky Way galaxy alone. Imagine the size of the Milky Way galaxy then. But this Milky Way galaxy, if you have to move from our Earth, which is on the outer edge of this spiral galaxy, even if we travel at the speed of light from our Earth to reach the center of our galaxy, it takes 3.2 million light years, even if you travel at 300,000 kilometers per second. See, that is the size of the Milky Way galaxy. But our Milky Way galaxy is not that big a galaxy. There are several galaxies 1,000 times bigger than the Milky Way galaxy. And there are 20,000 such galaxies in this cosmos. Now, compared to this gigantic size of this universe, our Earth is not even a grain of sand, literally, not metaphorically. Okay. So Christopher's question is very right. That is the marvel that we are going to understand from our discussions in cosmology. We are very small. The universe is enormously big. It is rich with mysteries, rich with marvels and wonders. Carl Sagan, that popular, his famous series on BBC, I think, Cosmos. There were 100 episodes or something for world famous it was at that time. And he is speaking in extremely mystical terms. He is in a way an atheist. But if you go through his videos and writings now, he sounds very much mystical. Although he did not believe in God, for him, the cosmos replaces itself as God. We can call cosmos as God because it is so rich in mysteries, wonders, and marvels in beauty. Okay, so this is a good anticipation of the wonders that we are going to learn in our cosmological discussions. Then from Lawrence Godfrey, when considering the transition from mechanism to symbolism, how can artificial intelligence be contextualized? Thank you, Lawrence, for this question. In fact, I had this, I think I had prepared something on artificial intelligence also as part of this slide. Anyway, I did not cover this one. In a way, we could say today, mechanical philosophy, despite the paradigm shift that has taken place in the history of physics from mechanical philosophy of nature to the modern new physics, mechanical philosophy is making a comeback. This is staging a comeback now. How? Through artificial intelligence. How is that? Artificial intelligence is very much based on the idea that universe is working perfectly according to strict laws, which can be controlled perfectly, which can be understood and controlled perfectly. Okay, that is the idea of artificial intelligence. Perfectly manageable laws of nature. Universe is very well programmed, and by understanding the codes with which the programming of the universe is made, we can program a supercomputer which will be much superior to human intelligence. That is the ultimate ambition of the artificial intelligence. That is part of our special questions in Science Legend Dialogue. In the final questions, we will have 2 or 3 lectures on artificial intelligence. This is the popular idea that artificial intelligence is founded on the old philosophy of the mechanical philosophy of nature. But for that reason, I am anticipating some of our discussions from the religious point of view. we must not get the impression that artificial intelligence is altogether against religious belief. I have made several presentations on artificial intelligence in several forums to scientists, philosophers, theologians, and social scientists, and so on. My viewpoint is that in as much as artificial intelligence is science at its best, it is also theology and spirituality at its best. I have often quoted Teilhard de Chardin, one author whom we have passingly taken reference to. He had predicted a century ago that having mastered the energies of wind, fire, and atom, for God's sake, science will rediscover the energies of love, and that will be the discovery of fire for the second time in the history of mankind. Science will rediscover the energy of love. Probably artificial intelligence, the final stage of the developments in artificial intelligence will be a good news for theology and philosophy. Say, for instance, there is ambitious research taking place in affective computing. On the one hand, affective computing is based on understanding the cognitive aspects of our affectivity. Secondly, can we make a computer itself affectionate? Of course, these are ambitious dreams now, but in science, today's fiction is tomorrow's reality. In future, this might become a reality as well. So the greater the intelligence, the deeper the faith also can be. It is not because that we are super intelligent that we refuse to believe in God. Rather, we are half intelligent. We find it difficult to believe in God. If we have greater intelligence through artificial intelligence, I think belief will be all the more easy as science advances. That is my optimistic deep visualization of these kinds of developments. So in this transition from mechanism to symbolism, artificial intelligence itself is a sign of the symbolic, the symbolism of nature, we could say. AI is very much, although we call artificial intelligence as artificial, this is very much a misnomer. Misnomer, is a wrong coinage of term. Why do I say no? Practically, there is nothing artificial in artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is pointing to the deeply natural in the nature. Say, the networking scenario, the neural networking model that the artificial big data intelligence's big data is using. This is very much modeled after the neural networking within the human brain. So brain is the model for the neural networking patterns in the computer algorithm of the management of the big data in artificial intelligence. This is borrowed from nature. Okay. The way proteins are decoding in human brain, that is what is used in artificial intelligence. Big data, what we cannot identify with our naked eyes or with our ordinary common senses. Big data, computer technology is helping us to identify the hidden parameters, the hidden designs. All this is again modeled after the mysteries of nature. So artificial intelligence is only mimicking nature. In that regard, artificial intelligence is not at all artificial. This is very much a celebration of the powers and mysteries of nature, we could say. In that regard, it will open our eyes in wonder to the mysteries of nature. Theologically put, it will bring us closer to the divine. Although artificial intelligence is said to be a kind of restoration of the old mechanical philosophy of nature, I don't think this will throw us into the materialistic and atheistic worldview of the past, provided people are skilled enough to appropriate the wider ramifications, the deeper philosophical mystical, metaphysical implications of these kinds of developments. That is what the challenge of science religion theorists like us as well. That also I wish to remind you. Okay, then again from Reginald Naligula to everyone. It is true, our galaxy is very small if we consider that we only make up only 5% of the cosmos. There is dark matter 27, but dark energy 69%. We are so limited in what we know and have. We need to sharpen our scientific tools to understand the vast cosmos out there. Thank you, Professor Reginald, for this additional information. This point we will be dealing with when we deal with the cosmology. In order to prepare the ground for our discussions in cosmology only, we are dealing with the theoretical tools of modern cosmology, namely relativity theory and quantum theory. When we come to modern cosmology, we will see that the visible matter in the universe is just 0.4% only for the visible matter. The rest, 4.6% is gas clouds. Then 20% plus dark matter, invisible matter, which is said to be existing. Again, dark energy, which has the repulsive force in the universe. The universe is expanding now. And the rate of expansion is only increasing as opposed to conventional mathematics. The principles of conventional calculation, the expansion rate of the universe is only increasing. What is causing this increase in the acceleration of the universe? Probably the repulsive energy called dark energy. And calculation states that nearly 74% of the matter in the universe must be dark energy. Then only 26% matter and dark matter. These things we will discuss in detail. Thank you, Reginald, for complementing that complexity of the universe altogether. Again, John Katema, Siva Vandana, an Indian scholar, was critical about mechanized agriculture and was famous for the idea of organic agriculture. She looks at mechanized agriculture versus vis-a-vis production, use of chemical fertilizer to boost production to curb hunger and malnutrition. Today, after raping nature through this mechanization, we are talking of going back to organic agriculture and caring for the earth. That is true. Thank you, Jane, for this added information. Siva Vandana is a popular environmental scientist and an ecological activist based here in India. She has a number of publications along this line. Not exactly mechanized agriculture, but the excessive use of chemical fertilizers that can be extremely harmful for the ecosystem, the well-being of the ecosystem. That is what she is attacking. That is true also in our Indian context as well. Of course, with the Green Revolution, India made rapid progress in agricultural production. Today, we are exporting wheat. Otherwise, especially in the post-independent phase, India has been waiting for the free export of wheat from donating countries like England or Americas. Now we have a surplus of food production because of the Green Revolution, where this industrial production of industrial techniques were applied to agricultural production as well. But nowadays, we are critically looking back at these kinds of applications as a result of the present challenges at stake. Anyway, Green Revolution lacked adequate foresight. That is a perception of the scientists today. M.S. Swaminathan is one of the founding fathers of the Green Revolution in our country. Of course, India honored him with a Bharat Ratna, the topmost civilian award in the country. But certainly he is a renowned scientist, but he is also criticized in some corners for lack of foresight, environmental foresight in conceiving the strategies of Green Revolution. Of course, and Vandana Shiva is one of the prominent ecological activists in that regard. Anyway, I'm very glad that you are capturing the major perspective. Not just capturing, you are already familiar with, or perhaps more informed than me in this regards, the implications of the paradigm shifts that is taking place in the sciences today. So this is the methodology that we are following, the hermeneutics that we will be coining in our dialogue between science, physics, and theology. Okay, let me call your attention to some of the theological paradoxes. I am presenting it hermeneutically, even if it is not, everything is not clear to you, doesn't matter. We will have a recapitulation of all these points once we conclude our discussions on physics after 3 or 4 lectures. There we will be revisiting all these points. See, does physics help us to conceive some of the central aspects of our Christian faith or religious belief in general? That is the question that we are posing in our dialogue between physics and theology. See, let me call your attention to these points. Jesus entered the room while the doors were closed. Of course, we are still through the Easter season as for Christians. How is it possible? Is it merely a figment of the mind or a theological fantasy? Or is it epistemically or more contentiously, scientifically possible for someone to enter the room when the doors are closed? Keep this question in mind. Trinity as 3 in 1 in the Christian doctrine. This might be seemingly a contradiction. 3 in 1 being 3, or 3 being there in 1 as just 1. Is it really an epistemic contradiction? Or is there a logic, a meta-logic that science itself is using, which gives greater plausibility for a rational assimilation of the mystery of Trinity? Incarnation as chirological placement in time. Time is a big mystery in science today, you know. Incarnation as chirological is a term from Karl Rahner. He considers incarnation to be a chirological moment. Chirological moment. Kairos, as opposed to the ordinary understanding of time as chronos, the linear time. Kairos would be unique moments in the historical time. And are such a kairos possible in the linear understanding of time? Or is time merely linear alone? Does physics help us to understand time differently? Keep this question in mind. I believe in the resurrection of the bodies. This is a statement that we are professing. This is an article of our faith professed in our creed. I believe in eternal life. I believe in the resurrection of the bodies. Can bodies be risen? Given the materialistic understanding of human body, as founded in the worldview of the mechanical philosophy, there is no scope for resurrection. Sheer nonsense. Physics has moved to the age of new physics. Quantum physics has re-enchanted the cosmos, re-sacralized the world. These were the claims that we made. In this re-enchanted, re-sacralized worldview, is there any scientific rational scope for legitimacy for the resurrection of the bodies? Our question is legitimate. Okay, I believe in eternal life. Again, founded on this question is related to our understanding of time. Is it merely a leap of faith that eternity is possible? Or is there any scientific endorsement for the scope of eternity? These are the questions that we have got to tackle with. See, we have not given any answer to these questions. Answers we are together exploring. See, these are the presuppositions of theology so far. I am calling your attention to the need for deconstructing first some of our traditional epistemologies and traditional worldviews, understanding of some traditional categories. Then we need to reconstruct those categories in a scientifically informed manner. Scientifically informed means informed by the theories of physics. Reconceiving the traditional concepts of space, time, matter, spirit, body, soul, from the perspective of the recent understanding of these concepts in new physics, gives greater legitimacy for faith in these kinds of assumptions. This is the statement that we have got to prove. What is the understanding of time in relativity? What is the understanding of space in relativity? What does quantum theory say about matter? Does quantum physics has nothing to do with spirit, but does the quantum understanding of matter imply something for the theological understanding of spirit? I believe in the affirmative. Quantum physics has nothing to do with the soul, but the quantum understanding of matter has something significantly to do with the body. But this scientific understanding, or this present day physicalist understanding of human body, does suggest something significant for the understanding of the human soul as conceived in theology. This is how our intersection of physics and theology will go. Okay, this is the epistemic philosophical framework that we will be calling. Again, all our traditional, I said about deconstruction as well as reconstruction. We need to deconstruct our age-old Aristotelian classical philosophical ideas of space and time, of matter and spirit, of body and soul. Again, we need to reconstruct. Again, this reconstruction is, as informed by modern physics, is founded on a new epistemology warranted by the developments in new physics. What is that worldview? A movement away from the three-dimensional world to a multi-dimensional world. This should be explained with the help of quantum physics. That we will be doing eventually. I am only anticipating the framework of our discussions here now. Again, look here. Some of the theological scriptural references I have given here. I tell you, if these keep silence, the stones will cry out. If the children are keeping mum, the stones are going to shout out. That is what Jesus told the Pharisees, no? Again, having said this, he spat on the ground and made a paste with the spittle, put this at the healing of the blind man with a spittle made out from the ground. Okay. And he asked him to go and wash, and the blind received sight. That is the idea. So, sounds much like a naturopathy. The healing power of soil, dust, clay. Is it possible? Given the new understanding of matter, in quantum theory, stones are live. A clay is rich with life. My language is metaphorical here. Okay, so please don't subscribe to me literally. Quantum physics helps us understand that. Yahweh then gave the donkey the power to talk from the book of Numbers. Can animals be speaking? Given the science worldview of modern physics, given the understanding of matter in modern physics or space and time in modern physics, any donkey that is not speaking is a miracle. Any clay that is not healing, that doesn't carry the power of healing, is a miracle. All stones can cry out, metaphorically put. That is the enchantment of stone. That is the sacralization of matter that modern physics has brought out. I have used a lot of theological license here, a lot of speculative theological hermeneutics here. I am not doing a one-to-one juxtapositioning between modern physics and contemporary theology. Rather, this is a hermeneutical intersection. So we should be very careful. Sometimes I myself have violated the principles of authentic science-religion dialogue. That is to provoke you and to challenge you. We should not draw one-to-one parallel between science and physics. Or we should not use physics or science just to prove the creed. Because the concerns of theology and science is very much different and distinct, we know. Then what is that we are doing here? We are drawing hermeneutical insights from modern physics that can be legitimately used for a contemporary theological appropriation of the traditional theological themata. That is what we are doing. That is a legitimate approach. So I am not arguing that quantum physics has proved scientifically the resurrection of the bodies, or quantum physics has shown that there is eternal life. That would be a far-fetched claim. But at the same time, for any open-minded researcher in science and theology, there is every conceptual scope for enhancing his faith in the conventional theological categories like the resurrection of the bodies or an eternal life or in the transcendence of the soul, aided by modern physics. That is an undisputed point. This point we can dispute with any atheist. That is what the top science religion theorists like William Lane Craig and so on are doing in their academic apologetic projects. Okay. So these are the challenges from physics. More than challenges, I would say, these are the opportunities from physics for theology today. Physics challenges the very fundamentals which we construct theology, namely space, time, matter, and laws of nature. Physics is challenging the fundamental concepts upon which our traditional theology and philosophy are built up. Say, for example, space. Space is no longer all our understanding, all our Aristotelian classical epistemology. Christopher has posed a question here. I will just quickly respond to that. So this is an opportune question. Are you trying to attempt to explain theological paradoxes in the context of science? Christopher, not exactly theological paradoxes. Of course, to provoke you, I have deliberately cited some paradoxes from the scripture and so on. In fact, the theological themata or the theological doctrines we are trying to scientifically appropriate, not scientifically prove. That is the point. In the context of science is too general. Here our concern is with physics. In the context of physics, we are trying to scientifically appropriate our traditional theological concepts. And my citations were mostly paradoxes from scripture and theology. And that is mostly to show, to open your mind to the possibilities that are open in modern physics. And what I am going to explain now here as opportunities from physics will further answer your question. Physics is challenging the fundamentals with which we are constructing theology, namely space, time, matter, laws of nature. In fact, this is all what we have got to explain through all our various inputs from scientists and theologians in our course. What does relativity say about space now? What does relativity say about time, and what is its implication for eternity? Say for instance, space is no longer three-dimensional in relativity theory. Einstein ruled out the distinction between space and time. He clubbed it together, combined together both space and time. Space and time are not distinct categories, but one category. With Einstein, we began to write space-time as one word with a hyphen. But now the hyphen also is withdrawn. Rather, space and time is written as space-time as just one word. Okay. If space and time are fused into one reality, we cannot imagine even that state of affairs. Space is not. Einstein added the time as the fourth dimension of space. Okay. Then what about how many dimensions space have now? 4 dimensions. But with in relativity, space is 4-dimensional. But further developments in physics have necessitated the existence of minimum 9 dimensions or 11 dimensions, or at least, or for some other theories, minimum 100 dimensions. String theory says our universe must be having at least 11 dimensions, not just the length, width, and height and time. As the dimensions increase, freedom of movement is increasing. The best experience that we can have in our world, in our ordinary life, is the 3-dimensional experience of the world, of a reality. 4th dimension, very difficult to understand that. 5th dimension, unimaginable. 6th dimension, 7th dimension, what kind of reality is it? Scientists are struggling with the mathematics to conceive a multidimensional world. For mathematics to be consistent in string theory, there should be at least 11 dimensions. As the dimensions increase, the restrictions of matter are gone. Okay. All of you are now seated on a chair, I guess. Can you sit without a chair? If the multidimensional world as conceived by science is true, we do not require a floor to stand or a chair to sit. That is a tangible scientific reality. Now keep in mind the first question I posed to you. Can someone enter the room while the doors are closed? Only a spirit can enter. Now, in a multidimensional world, the distinction between spirit and matter gets blurred. The distance between matter and spirit gets shortened, at least we could say. This is the point that we wish to argue. More scientifically, we have got to prove. I am not sure how much in scientific detail we should go. Certainly, we will have inputs on relativity and quantum theory. There you will see how Einstein has ruled out the Newtonian understanding of space and time and has combined space-time together, and how quantum physics has carried further the understanding of space-time towards wider nuances in a multidimensional understanding of reality. Okay, then matter. the distinction between matter and spirit. Matter, going by traditional philosophy, Aristotelian philosophy, what is the definition of matter? That which is extended in space and time. Extension is the essential property of matter. See, all of us are extended in space and time. We are extended in space in 3 dimensions, length, width, and height. And also we have a beginning and end. That is our extension in time. Therefore, we are material beings. That is the meaning of matter. Spirit in Aristotelian Thomistic philosophy is that which is beyond matter. It doesn't have extensions. It is beyond the limitations of matter. It is not extended. That is why spirit can be everywhere. God is omnipresent on account of his property of being spirit. Okay. A spirit is not confined to space and time constraints. Therefore, it can be anywhere. Can a risen body be proximate to spirit? Or did Jesus get rid of the limitations of matter with his glorified body in resurrection? Did it allow him to enter the closed room? Just to keep these questions in mind. That's why I said, for appropriating the theological mysteries, contemporary theories of physics help us very much. Again, physics exposes the tension between history and transhistory, the temporal and the trans-temporal, between the spatial and the trans-spatial. If I sound a bit abstract here, I am sorry, but this is the fundamental framework that we should be familiar with. We are dealing with the metaphysics of physics. The metaphysics of physics. More than what the theories of physics are implying, which are close to all theological assumptions. History, religious doctrines or theological doctrines, although they are historically evolving and founded in history, cannot be confined merely to history. The true depth and width of the theological doctrines should be explored in a trans-historical setting. Trans-historical means being beyond time. That is the same as trans-temporal. Resurrection is an event in history, but the full nuances of resurrection is captured only in a trans-historical understanding. The depth and width of the mystery of resurrection cannot be conceived fully in its historical description alone. Say, for instance. Okay. So, the tension, physics is today providing us with a lot of trans-historical material. The physical data helps us to speculate legitimately over its trans-historical implications. The temporal and the trans-temporal, the spatial and the trans-spatial. So, for instance, we said the revisioning of matter in quantum physics as opposed to the classical worldview, where matter was merely dead and passive. Whereas here it is enchanted, and with some theological license, we said it is sacred in quantum physics. How do we justify this claim? I will call your attention to a statement by Fritjof Capra, the author of the bestseller, The Tao of Physics. He says, matter does not exist with a certainty at the subatomic level. It's a midway between existence and non-existence. It is both a wave and particle at the same time. It is in movement and rest at the same time. It is here and there at the same time. This is the paradox that we encounter in physics. It is these kinds of paradoxical state of affairs that physics is reporting that we are theologically, hermeneutically appropriating as endorsing or as rendering legitimacy to our theological doctrines. Okay. Then they challenged the principle of identity. Same as challenged the principle of non-contradiction. Four-sided triangle is not a contradiction. Here I have borrowed all these categories from the Aristotelian classical epistemology, upon which our traditional Thomistic mainstream Christian theology is built up. Not only Christian theology, Islamic theology, Hindu theology. Of course, Hindu theology is much beyond the Aristotelian epistemology, but especially in the Judeo-Christian Islamic tradition, all theology is founded on these epistemic categories. But you know, the central assumptions of the Judeo-Christian theological epistemology is significantly or radically challenged by the developments in new physics today. This is a very good news for theology, but unfortunately, our theologians are not able to draw the full nuances or full implications of these kinds of developments. Pope John Paul II has been very prophetic in that regard, we must say. That is why John Paul II said in his address to the Pontifical Academy of Sciences, just as the Aristotelian philosophy, just as the Christian theology was influenced, just as the Aristotelian philosophy laid the foundations of Christian theology in the Middle Ages, today, in this century, Christian theology should be founded upon the natural sciences. Christian theology is very much founded on Aristotelian epistemology, we know. Aristotelian philosophy altogether. Because Saint Augustine and Thomas Aquinas, the central pillars of theology, they have their sources in Plato and Aristotle. We saw it in philosophy. So, just as medieval philosophy and theology was influenced by Greek philosophy, today, theology should be founded on contemporary sciences. This is a very far-sighted vision. That is rich with the scope. That is why we say. So, principle of identity, you know, A is A only. I can be here only in this space and in this time. But modern physics challenges the principle of identity. Something can be both a wave and particle at the same time. Identity is challenged. Non-contradiction is challenged. The principle of A can be A and not A at the same time. I can be a male only, not a female at the same time. I can be fully male and fully female at the same time, going by quantum epistemology. For necessity, something that cannot be without. Our example is a triangle can have only 3 sides, not 4 sides. This is what we call as necessity in Aristotelian epistemology. But there can be triangles with the 4 sides in quantum epistemology. I am sorry, I know I am only confusing you, but this confusion is very good, and this confusion is very important for our theological project ahead in the light of the developments in relativity theory, quantum theory, and so on. So this is the framework that we will be using for exploring the theological implications of relativity and quantum theory. We will have inputs on relativity, the science of relativity and quantum theory, and then we will be exploring the theological implications of these theories, mainly these developments. And there we will revisit the questions of resurrection, soul, eternity, and so on. And we will see how far can we use science for arguing this kind of points. Okay. Can spirit be part of the 11 dimensions, maybe a dark matter? Next, how many questions are there? Explaining about matter, how would explain the omnipresent paradox of God in this context? Yeah, I will only 2 questions. No, I think we have enough time. 5 minutes more we have. Yeah. Can spirit be? Actually, both questions are related. Thank you, Christopher, for the first question. Can spirit be part of the 11 dimension? Again, Christopher, I appreciate your effort in drawing insights from physics in conceiving spirit, theological category like spirit. At the same time, I caution you in your methodology. Of course, as beginners in science, in religion dialogue, we have the freedom to make, to be too much speculative and use science to prove theology. But as you advance in your knowledge, I would appeal and request that you must refine your methodology.
Okay.
We must not reduce theological categories to any of the scientific categories. The methodology of theology is different. It is based on revelation. Its categories and concepts are different. It cannot be fully reducible to the experimental quantitative approaches of science and physics. Therefore, although science may add 11 dimensions or 100 dimensions to matter, it does not subsume the exhaustiveness of the mystery of the spirit. Spirit is much more than that. This is qualitative, spiritual. Science 11 dimensions is again in the quantitative empirical domain. That we should be careful. At the same time,
I just want to interpret.
yes,
Interrupt you.
yeah.
There has been some type of, for example, the experiences, spiritual experiences of people whom they feel that someone is around them, or someone is prompting them to do this particular thing, kind of a vision. So,
I know,
so I'm
Christopher,
saying
what
from
you
that
are.
context. So I said, is it that can be a part of a
Christopher,
dimension
we
which
should
we are
be
talking of?
careful about such kind of reports. Many are inclined to use these kinds of reports. In fact, all those reports are very much untested. Even if they are objective and real, there are neurological and psychological explanations possible for that. At the same time, we need not be fully ruling out them as merely pertaining to the laws of nature. Of course, those things can have some theological credibility for that. At the same time, I just uh, uh, only warn you about some caution required for subscribing to these kinds of reports. Maybe when we deal with the neuroscience and its implications, neuro-religion, we have all these kinds of issues discussed in detail there. The phantom reports, the presence of other beings, virtual beings, apparitions, all these things we will be discussing those things. How far can we subscribe to these kinds of reports? What are cautions we need to be employing all these things? Anyway, from the point of view of physics, I think we are still far from endorsing these kinds of reports in terms of the presence of spirit and so on. Okay, I got your point, Christopher. We will revisit this again. Okay. Only concluding my point in answering to your question, we only say not proving, but distance or distinction between the material and the spiritual is getting blurred or withered away. Not fully. We have more scope for bringing together both the physics and metaphysics, both body and soul, both the spirit and matter. So much we can say. From that point of view, we should not endorse scientific legitimacy for the popular reports about the presence of the deceased souls and so on along with us. I think there is not so much from physics for those kinds of reports. Okay. Again, from Adib, explaining about matter, how would explain the omnipresent paradox of God in this context? Adib, this is a question that we should be explaining eventually. Omnipresence, we said, is a matter of spirit. God has no body. God is not bound by the restrictions of matter, which by nature has extension in space and time. God is not material, therefore God doesn't have the limitations of space. God doesn't have any dimensions. Therefore, God is spirit. Spirit by definition is present everywhere, can be present everywhere. And in fact, even in traditional philosophy, the omnipresence of God is not that God is present everywhere in the world. That is not how we understand even in theology or philosophy. Rather, world is present in God. Everything is God. God is everywhere. How? Because the world evolves out of God, and thereby the entire world is present in God. God by definition is spirit, and as such he is omnipresent, and as such the world, not that the God is present everywhere in the world, but the entire world is present in God. That is how we should conceive it. And more of it, this I have answered more from the philosophical point of view only. I have only used the scholastic Thomas Aquinas' idea here, as world as present in God, as the omnipresence of God. And more of these ideas we can be discussing. This is only an introductory lecture to the theological, philosophical resources at stake in modern physics. And that we will explain first. And that prepares the ground for our discussions on cosmology, the origin of the universe, the Big Bang theory, and does it allow the scope for a creator God? And is there life on other planets, exoplanets, astrotheology or exotheology, we call it? And if there is like human beings and other planets, what are its theological implications? And the gigantic size of the universe, what are its philosophical theological implications? What is the end of the universe in science? And what is the theological eschatology as outlined in the sacred scripture? What do they have in common with the scientific understanding of the end of the universe? These are the various themes that constitute our curriculum in this course. So that is what we will be discussing eventually as we proceed in the future sessions on Friday. Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Adip. I think we are already 4 minutes past. Thank you for your attention. We will meet on next Friday.